Oh shit,
Hey.
are you ready, buddy?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, how's it going?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Doing pretty good.
All right, so let's frame the discussion. You seem to think that Islamic people represent a grave threat to the United States.
Yes.
Okay, can you tell me ways today in which the United States is threatened by Islam?
Well, let me preface it. I had watched your video. I believe it was the Islam in the U.S. or something. It was one of your recent videos.
Sure.
I think you had two on YouTube that was regarding Islam specifically. Um, but the claim, I mean, you had made a claim that Islam, that not being an issue in the U.S. because the statistics you bring up solely looked at the violence on U.S. soil, and the idea that a toxic ideology that exists outside of the U.S. has no effect on the United States because of that is a little bit absurd.
Okay, can you tell me which ways that the toxic ideology of Islam has an impact on the United States?
Sure, I mean, the one of the biggest things that you'll learn in geopolitics is purely influence, right? We have an obligation, just looking at our military specifically, we sort of have an obligation. I mean, I don't know if you consider them to be accounted for in what you said before. But yeah, no, our military is one of the biggest issues right now that we're facing on a daily basis, the Islamic terrorism.
Okay, wait, you're saying that Islamic terrorism is a threat because our military is invading other countries that has Islamic terrorists? I feel like this is a little bit backwards rationale. Like, what?
No, well, you made that implication. No,
Okay,
that
well,
was the
explain to me,
implication.
because I asked you how Islamic terrorism or the ideology thereof is a threat to the United States, and you said our military. So I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean.
Sure. Well, I mean, we have a lot of obligations right now and I'm sure you're aware of, that we have to sort of step in. And unfortunately, we are playing the role right now as the world police. But the fact of the matter is, the threat that we're facing right now, our military, it's Islamic extremism.
Okay,
Um,
where in the world are we being forced to step in to fight Islamic extremism?
Everywhere we have thus far.
So you're talking about when we
From,
decided
from,
to go into
it's
Iraq
a
and depose Saddam? Are you talking about when we decided to go into Libya and get rid of Gaddafi? Are you talking about when we decided to try to go into Syria and get rid of Assad? Are you trying to talk about the Iranian Revolution? Which one are you talking about?
sure. There's a case
So
to be
when we
made for all of
choose to
those.
go overseas and fuck with democracies or fuck with elected leaders and then depose them, that's Islam's fault then?
In a sense, yeah, because that ideology is spreading. It's a viral ideology. I believe the number right now is somewhere between 600 and 800 million radical Muslims currently live in the world right now.
Why is it that there aren't 800
That's
million radical Muslims committing terrorist attacks if there are 800 million of them?
what?
You just said 800 million radical Muslims commit or are radicalized. Why aren't they all committing terrorist attacks?
What is the yes? No, the claim that 800 million radical Muslims, that doesn't mean 800 million of them are all going to commit terrorist
Okay, so what does
attacks.
that mean?
Well, let's define
I
radical.
know what radical
When
is.
when
Radical
you
is what
say
you read on the Pew Research poll that says a lot of people believe in apostasy. I don't care about that. I'm asking you how many Muslims are going to commit terrorist attacks because we're talking about terrorism, not how many people are radicalized or whatever vague bullshit that means. Because I'm asking about threats to the United States, not what people said in a Pew Research poll. So if you say there are 600 to 800 million radicalized Muslims, why aren't there like terrorist attacks representing it? Maybe how radicalized somebody is or whatever isn't really that relevant to a discussion.
no, it certainly is.
Okay.
The Pew Research poll that you were talking about that you kind of shrugged off, I don't understand why you're kind of
Because I'm asking you about
dismissing the significance of
impact.
it.
I'm not because it doesn't mean anything. It's just a stat in a vacuum.
Or
If you
what do
spend
you
any
mean by
time in your,
impact?
it
What does
doesn't
impact mean to you?
impact like things happening
Like
in
deaths?
reality.
Are you
Yeah,
asking for
sure, deaths
deaths?
or terrorism. Yeah, impact. Yes.
It's not as simple as looking at a piece of paper
Oh,
and
I
saying
agree.
that.
It's not as
Well,
simple.
yes. Okay. So my point that I'm making is that because it exists outside of the U.S., there are other ways than just killing United States citizens that it can affect us
Okay, what other ways can
economically
it
and
affect us?
strategically.
Are there
military
countries?
strategy,
Are there
100%.
countries that have put massive sanctions on the United States because of Islam?
No,
Okay.
there
Are
are
there
not.
countries that have refused trade with the United States because of Islam? Because you said economic, so I'm trying to figure out what economic reasons you're talking about.
It's all 100% of the points I'm making right now. I mean, those are separate arguments, but 100% of the
I'm
points I'm
just
making
listen.
right now
Okay,
are
here.
related to strategic and military.
Okay, so the way that we framed this initially was you're claiming that Islam is harming the United States, and you're using this like really, really roundabout method, and you're struggling to find a single way it is when you tell me that they're a bigger threat or one of the largest threats to the United States. It seems like this should be really easy to define. If it's such a massive threat to the United States, why do you
No,
have
it
to
shouldn't be
reach
easy
so
to
hard?
define.
Why
It
not?
shouldn't be easy
Why
to
do you have
define
to?
because there's way too many variables involved. When you're talking about problems that we face in the United States, economic. I mean, I'm not going to be able to pinpoint every single economic issue. I'm not
I'm
an
not asking you to
expert in this. I'm
pinpoint
not
every
gonna
single one.
claim
I'm
to be
just
an
asking you to
expert in this
pinpoint
field.
one. You said that Islam, extremist Islam or whatever, was a massive threat to the United States, and I'm trying to find examples of how it's a threat. Because as an American that's
I
not an
gave you
idiot, I don't feel very
sorry.
threatened.
No, I gave you the example of our military right now. Where I mean, you can debate the
Okay,
viability
was
of our
Pearl
strategy
Harbor
currently.
committed by Islam people? Where
Uh,
is this massive threat to our military from Islam extremists? It's not the air raids that we're doing. Like,
um, what?
where has our military threatened right now by Islamic extremism?
Everywhere that our active duty soldiers and Marines are being deployed.
Okay, so first of all, so you're talking
You
about
understand? Well, okay. First of all, right? We basically have a network, right? We have a really good understanding of what's going on around the world because of our military. In order for that to have ever been a possibility, we needed to. And I mean, this is a separate discussion and also outside of my pay grade. But regardless, in order for us to have the knowledge and security that we have today, right, there needed to be the invasions. There needed to be several different steps that took place that could only have unfolded through the threat of Islamic terrorism.
what, like
so you can
what?
call it-
Name one or two. What name some of these? Because most of our I'm sorry, hold on.
I'm
Most
sorry.
of our international intelligence today probably has way more to do with the Cold War than anything having to do with Islamic extremism. We literally funded people like the Al Mujahideen or whatever
Why do
because
you
we
think
were.
that?
What do you mean? What? Because the entire existence of NATO isn't because of Islamic extremism. It's because of Russia or the Soviet Union.
Okay, all right. I'm talking about our current network that we have in the Middle East.
Okay, what about I'm sorry. What about our network in the Middle East?
I'm saying that a lot of the let me back up. A lot of or sorry, let me rephrase rather.
Hold on. Actually, wait.
Um,
Hold on. Can I ask you a question? Just because I can leave this. Why do you think we're so interested in the Middle East?
Probably financial reasons.
Okay, and because of geopolitical, or I'm sorry, because of geographical locations related to Russia. That's why we're so interested in the Middle East. It has nothing to do with Islamic terrorism. When you look at our military,
Wait, I'm sorry. Say that again. I'm sorry, I missed that.
geographical superiority concerning Russia, or geographical strategic positioning concerning Russia, is our main interest in things in places like Syria.
That's an assumption, but okay.
It's not an. I'm sorry. It's not an
That is
assumption.
an assumption.
Russia has
That's
two
literally
warm
an
water
assumption.
ports, okay? The only one leading out to the Mediterranean is that port in Syria. I don't remember the name. The Targon, I think the port in Syria, is one of Russia's only two warm water ports. This is why Putin is so massively concerned with holding on to that area. Why do you think Russia and China have banded
Oh,
together?
no. That's I'm not contesting that. I'm not debating that. Sure, I agree with that 100%. I don't understand.
Wait,
how
then
that
what did you
contradicts.
disagree with that I just said? I'm telling you that our interest
sorry,
in the Middle
I
East, we're not
thought you
going
had-
over there to rid the world of Islamic terrorism. This is why we don't go to Africa to get rid of Islamic terrorism. We don't care about Islamic terrorism. We care about
Yeah,
strategic
no, we don't give
positions
a shit about
related.
it. That's not.
Well,
Yeah,
but you
I
just said
agree
that
with
our primary
100%.
reason for being over there and all of our military was owed to Islamic terrorism, and now you just said we don't give a shit about it. So which one is it?
No, that's what we use specifically as the catalyst to go into there. I'm not saying that
Or
the
TARDIS, I'm
lawmakers
sorry.
who are making us go into there specifically give a shit. I'm not. That wasn't. I never made that.
Okay, so how does Islamic terrorism force us to grow a military network in these parts of the world?
Force us to grow a military network in this part of the world?
That was your argument, wasn't it? Or am I wrong?
Sure, no, we definitely use it as a reason for it. I'm not saying that's necessarily um, a good reason, but you can't deny that the reason we gave everybody for going into Iraq was to
Yes,
get
this is
rid
the
of
American
foreign
people being
terrorists.
duped. This isn't the actual reasons why we go there. But that was my whole argument in the
Right.
first place. The only reason why this terrorism is a threat is because people get so hung up on it. But in actuality, it really isn't that big of a threat.
No, it really is, and I'm
Okay, but
arguing
I'm asking you
that
to
on a
argue
separate.
why. You haven't made any arguments for it.
The ideology, 100%. It's a viral ideology.
If it's so
It's
viral, then
spreading.
why aren't fucking Muslim ideologies taking control all over the world?
That's why I asked you initially to define or sorry, radicalized Islam.
Okay, I'm
You kind of shrugged off the pupils, but that's pretty significant numbers
how do
that
the
show that
pupils
the
manifest
vast
themselves?
majority.
Has any place in the United States voted for Sharia law?
Yes. Or you're saying actually uh, enacted
Yeah.
Sharia law? No, of course not.
Okay, so I'm trying to find the threat to the United States.
Well, okay, you keep trying to simplify it, but let me
But
attempt to simplify it
okay.
to kind of get my argument through. So let's say 5 years ago, you look at the statistics and radicalized, according to the Pew polls or whatever statistics you want to look at, what you would consider radicalized Islam was maybe 10% of the current Muslim population. Right. 5 years later, you look back at you do the same polls, you do randomized, all the good stuff, and you find out that it's risen to 30%. Right. You check 5 years later, it's 55%. Check 5 years later, it's 60%. Are you gonna your argument is because they're currently not doing anything, they're currently not committing any acts of terrorism or killing any Americans, that's not an issue?
I mean, it might be an issue, but in terms of like represents a large, like, listen to what you're saying. Like, well, what if there's an ideology and more people are starting to buy into it, but there aren't any terrorist attacks and there isn't anybody getting killed and there's no property being destroyed and there's nothing really happening, but these people all think these thoughts. Isn't that a problem? I mean, yeah, I guess it's kind of a problem, but nowhere near a large one. Like, yeah, it's something that would be addressed. Also, the problems that you're talking about could also be a little bit cyclical in nature as well. Like, where the reason why people become more radicalized is because people in the United States become more radicalized as well. Where we're saying fuck Islam, they're not allowed to build mosques here, cut off all borders. Like, I mean, this stuff also probably leads to radicalizing of people a bit as well. If it feels like the country you're in fucking hates you and wants to kick all of you out.
Definitely. No, I don't disagree with that. But I'm just refuting the claim you made initially was that Islam is not a threat on U.S. soil, and I think
No, I mean, I'm sure it is to some extent, but if I were to name 10 issues facing the United States, I could find 10 in an instant that are more pressing than Islamic radical terrorism. Like, it's very, very, very small in the overall threat to our existence in the West.
give it a shot. I don't think you can.
What, you want me to name 10?
I don't think you can name five.
You don't think I could name 5?
No, I don't.
Okay, we'll try.
We're
I think that
talking about issues. We're talking about issues that we can actually actively fight against. First of all,
Okay,
if
how
you
many?
say,
I don't want to say economic issues because that's really broad, but there are tons of things in terms of our employment that could be acted upon, right? Do you think so? I think that there are a ton of economic issues that could be dealt with in the West, right? Maybe reforming some of our trade agreements if they're so bad, maybe doing something to help our manufacturing if that's possible, right? So there's like fucking 20 things already underlying there, right? I think that our immigration policy needs massive reform, all right? There's multiple issues there as well. We do need to do something with our border to the south. I don't know how we deal with that, right? But something has to happen. I think that our healthcare system is in shambles. That's something that absolutely needs to be addressed. The ACA is not helping prices, and when the Trumples fucking repeal it, who the fuck knows what's going to be there after that? Our education system is a fucking catastrophe. It's nothing to be proud of. We're falling behind in all these other European countries. Like, off the top of my head, those are 4 issues right there that are of paramount importance compared to fucking radical Islamic extremism. We can keep going. I gotta try
disagree.
environmental. Okay. Hold on. Let me list these.
Well, let's-
So
let's-
hold on.
let's
Wait,
go-
real
yeah, let's
fast.
go
We
one
have
by one.
we have economic, immigration, healthcare, education, and I'll even throw climate change on there, okay? These are 5 issues that I think are easily more pressing than terrorism. So let's start at the top. Economic issues. You think that dealing with radical Islamic...
radical,
What?
radical Islamic extremism. I'm not saying terrorism.
Okay,
Acts of
radical.
terrorism,
Okay, so how do you think that
are-
radical Islamic extremism is worse than the economic issues facing us today?
All of the above would be significantly easier to be solved. Well, sorry, they would be significantly easier to gain support. Right, they wouldn't be as held back if we didn't have or sorry, if we were a lot more secularized than we are right now. I mean, you would agree with that, and that's concerning Christianity. That's concerning every religion.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, going down the list,
education.
how does
Okay.
radical Islamic extremism keep us from making economic change in our country?
Economic change?
Yes. Okay, let's go down to the second.
I was focused on education.
Okay,
So
we'll go all the.
education.
Okay, we'll go down to education then. How can radical
Sure.
Islamic? How does radical Islamic extremism negatively impact the education in the United States?
Well, you see, I'm going to bring up a different.
Nope, you have to answer this question. I can't let you keep hopping around a topic when you've lost, like every single time. You can tell me how radical Islamic extremism. What?
I'm not trying to hop around the topic.
Okay, then how does radical Islamic extremism impact education in the United States?
The way you phrase the question, though, if you were to phrase it like, how does a toxic...
Okay, how does a toxic ideology impact education in the United States?
If I were to ask you that on a separate day, I'm sure you'd be able to answer that.
I can tell you how Christianity affects education in the United States. Christians in a lot of places want to roll back Common Core. They're in favor of education, or they're in favor of homeschooling massively because of religious reasons. Christians also are in favor of teaching evolution in school instead of creationism. Christians are by far more in favor of local education because they can have more religious influence over what's being taught. So there's three issues right off the top of my head on how Christians impact education in the United States. So can you tell me how does Islam, radical Islamic extremism, impact negatively education in the United States?
How does the pursuit against science impact education in the United States?
Is that how you want to frame it? Then give me examples of Islamic people being against science in the United States, cutting scientific funding, right? These are usually Republicans that do these cuts in Congress. Like, which cuts to funding have Islam people made to scientific funding in the United States?
Do you want me to pinpoint a specific cut?
I want you to pinpoint a single thing.
1997, there was a...
So your tweets at me were at Omni Destiny. You said you don't have anything prepared. You said
glad to bring that.
At Omni Destiny. Just watched your discussion on Islam versus Christianity in the U.S. You have a laughable understanding of geopolitics. At Omni Destiny. It's like this is your first day being involved with politics. LeMayo. At Omni Destiny. I wish you had the bullocks to debate someone with any critical thinking skills. At Omni Destiny. It's unfortunate you only choose to debate the lowest common denominators. Is that why I chose to debate you today? Because you don't seem to have a single thing to say on any of these issues. Yet you seem so willing to engage in like such insane fucking bants on Twitter. I don't understand why. You can't name me a single... You haven't said anything. You haven't given me a single thing that Islam negatively impacts the United States. We can hit the other topics as well. How does Islam affect our healthcare in the United States? It doesn't.
I mean, if you'd like, we can go in. We can Google these things, and I can prepare actual statistics for you.
Okay, they're not going to find any statistics. Well, what are you getting at then?
Literally, the very first tweet you just read is what I was getting at.
The first tweet that you said was that the majority of our meddling in the Middle East, the first thing you brought up was that meddling in the Middle East was done because of Islamic terrorism. That informs our foreign policy, when that's absolutely not true. NATO informs our foreign...
That's not what I said.
Okay, that sounded very much like what you said. I'm pretty sure you said we owe all of our intelligence in the Middle East to fighting Islamic terrorism. I thought you said that almost exactly.
No, if you were to remember, maybe 15 seconds after that, we had agreed that we were saying that no, the United States is using that specifically as a tool to get us in there. That's not necessarily right or wrong.
Okay, so let's back. Okay, so let's back up all the way. Let's back up. Okay, so I'll back all the way up, and I'll frame the question one more time. Can you name me a way?
And that's a separate argument altogether.
Okay, so let's back all the way up to the initial question. Can you name me a way in which radical Islam extremism ideology or whatever is a significant threat to the United States, more so than the 5 things that we named quickly on this list?
It's the fastest growing negative ideology we've ever seen thus far.
Fastest growing negative ideology we've ever seen thus far. How does this supposedly fastest negative ideology we've ever seen growing? How does this manifest itself as a threat to the United States? How does it manifest itself as a threat to the United States?
How does a negative ideology manifest itself as a threat to the United States?
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
That's a bit of a silly question.
Okay, why is it silly?
What if Nazism was manifesting itself in the United States?
Then it would probably manifest itself in the form of oppression of Jewish people, of policies trying to be passed that would oppress Jewish people, of Jewish people being murdered or killed in the streets. Like, I don't know, I can think of tons of ways that neo-Nazis could manifest themselves negatively in the United States.
That's not how it works. You don't just no. People who have law and order currently. I mean, the United States is pretty stable, one of the most stable countries, I would argue, in the world right now. So if you get an ideology that's manifesting itself, like you like to say, in the United States, it's not going to translate into a light switch. You know, tomorrow there's going to be beheadings in the street and Sharia law getting passed and all of these. That's not how it works.
Okay.
That's not how it works at all.
Okay, so how does it work? Give me like the doomsday scenario for Islam taking over the United States.
I never mentioned the doomsday scenario.
Can you give me the scenario in which this threat becomes
I
a
did.
thing?
I literally did. I said, listen, 10% of the people, right? 10 years ago. This is a very simplified version, and you have yet to give me a response to this one specifically. 10% of the people, say 15 years ago, believed in this really, really bad ideology. Let's just call it Islam, or let's just call it, you know, X ideology, right? Mm-hmm. This X ideology, the majority of people approved of beheadings of people who left the religion. It approved of violence on women. It approved of everything in the book that you can think of that you would consider negatively or to be an ethical issue, right? Something that we wouldn't really stand for in the United States. 5 years later, it's 20%. 5 years later, it's 30%. 5 years later, eventually you get to the 60%.
Okay,
right?
What happens
when
at the 60%
do you start
mark?
actively pursuing?
What happens at the 60% mark?
No, I'm asking you a question. When do you start pursuing, right, any sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Any sort of not defense, but any sort of thing to combat that sort of ideology.
You don't, because this is the United States of America.
You're
free to practice whatever religion you want. It's in the Constitution. I'm sorry.
No, that's inherently incorrect. That the reason we have science in school is to essentially practice against this sort of ideology, right? This is the reason we have philosophy.
What part of what I
just
said? Wait, what part of what I just said? What part of what I just said was incorrect?
You don't. That was incorrect.
Okay, so I'm sorry. What are you suggesting?
Ethically, you do.
What are you suggesting? What is the way to combat it?
Well, we can get into that. Well, first you have to. I mean, I think Hillary
how is
did
this even the fastest growing ideology? Hasn't Islam been around for like fucking 2,000 years? It's had a lot of time to fucking grow. It seems like it's taking a while, dude.
No, Islamic extremism in its current state was maybe 55 years.
What do you mean in its current state? Are you telling me that Muslims have never been fucking crazy before? Didn't they used to sack cities and go on fucking crusades and shit?
Oh, definitely, but not in the developed world, right? Not.
What do you mean not in the developed world for the time? Yeah, of course.
Okay, so pre-1950s, give me an example of Islamic terrorism, extremism, running cities and beheading mass people.
Pre-1950s?
Yeah.
What wasn't the entire fucking?
You're gonna have to stretch back pretty far for that one, right?
My history is pretty bad, but I know that Islam has been involved in a lot of different religious conflict over the years. I'm trying to see of what I know of the Armenian genocide. I don't know if I could really pin that on Islam or not, but I mean that was pretty bad, and I think that Turkey was Muslim majority at the time. Does the Armenian genocide count?
I'm sorry, you cut out.
Does the Armenian genocide count? Can I say that or?
Oh, I guess that would count. I would actually consider that less to be that definitely counts. So I would actually readjust that to pre-1915, right?
Okay. I don't know, dude.
I mean, I'm sorry I missed the Armenian genocide. I wasn't really thinking about that one. I had to make up a number on the spot, but
I'm pretty sure that I can find something in the list. No, what is your point? Is that you just fucking grabbed the goalpost and ran it down another 20 years? Come on, dude. I'm sure something happened in the 1900s or the late 1800s that involved Islam fucking fighting somewhere and whatnot. Like, people fight all the fucking time. I don't think that, I mean, Islam has had fucking over 1,500 years.
Not nearly on the scale. Even the Armenian genocide.
Not on the scale? Islam isn't doing anything on the scale, dude. It's fucking nothing. ISIS is fucking shit. They have nothing. What do you mean?
Islamic extremism isn't doing anything right now in the world?
On a scale? No, of course not.
What?
Give me an example of massive amounts of attacks. Give me an example. What do you mean by what are they doing on a scale right now?
I mean, if you just open up a newspaper and look at anything going on right now in the Middle East, that's going to be motivated.
You said in the world.
Islamic.
I'm not asking in the Middle East. I'm talking about in the world. What is Islamic terrorism doing all over the world? Aside from
maybe I'm not The
What?
Middle East is the world.
Okay, so
Uh,
then the question isn't Islamic extremism a threat to the world? Is it to a threat to the Middle East? Is that what we want to make the new question? Because the question was initially about America. Now I've opened it up to all around the world, and now you want to center it around the Middle East?
what are you talking about? Yes, the Middle East, it does exist in the world, Destiny. This is, yes, that was the point I was
We're not
making.
asking if it exists in the world. If I ask you if your body is covered in third-degree burns, and you say, yes, it is, and I say, oh my God, where? And you say, well, look, a little bit on my finger. And I go, what the fuck? And you go, well, my finger is on my body, dude, obviously. Like, what the fuck? That
What
doesn't
is
make
this
sense.
analogy?
We're
You asked if
having a
pregnancy
question about
exists in
whether or
the
not
world. I'm
Islamic
telling you the
terrorism
Middle
is a
East.
threat to the entire world. It was America specifically. Then we brought it to the entire world. And now you're saying, well, it is a threat in the Middle East. The Middle East is not the entire world. Just because something is contained in something
First of
doesn't make
all,
it everything. Like, what do
okay.
you...
Are you finished? First of all, I never said the entire world.
I don't know what we're talking about. I'm sorry. Can you reframe the original question? Because now I don't know what we're talking about anymore. I'm sorry. I thought we were talking about the entire world, but I guess we're
No,
not.
no, no. No, well, you asked me, asked where is it a problem right now in the current world?
I said
In the world,
around. The,
right?
okay, so now we want so
Or no, maybe you said around the world, right? And
because you were talking about a
I said the
threat to
Middle East.
civilized society and shit. So I assumed that we were talking about like the Western world. But so, what is the conversation topic now? Because I'm totally lost. Now we're asking
No,
if Islamic
I think
extremism is a threat to the Middle East.
no, I think that's a given. I think we can agree on that one specifically. That what we're arguing is whether or not it's a threat in the United States.
Okay,
You
so
asked me to give an example of
and it's a
of
threat in the
a rampant
United States.
ideology.
Because it's 5%, 10%, 15%, and then up to 100%. That's the threat to the United States.
Yes.
Okay. But you can't give me any ways in which it currently manifests itself as negative to the United States whatsoever.
Yeah. No. The polls that you had mentioned in the beginning. That's literally what I was going to give you. That's all I needed.
That's
sort
all
of
anybody ever has. Does that ever make you nervous that when people, when you guys are all like running around like talking about these issues, like you always like, well, look at the Pew polls, and that's like the only thing you have to back your shit up? Does that ever bother you?
I don't. What do you mean, you people? I'm not. No.
When you bring
That
up
doesn't
the
bother me.
idea that 800 million Islamic people are radicalized, but you can't point to anything going on with all of these people, like that doesn't bother you at all? Like, doesn't it make you
Look.
stop and think, like, well, fuck, maybe it's a little bit more complicated than just like polling on a question about apostasy?
We can get into the variables behind that. Why you're not seeing it manifest itself in actual physical violence in the United States?
Okay, why
I'd be
doesn't it
willing to have that
manifest itself in
conversation.
actual physical violence in the United States?
I would say it mostly has to do with the laws we currently have. That it's very, very difficult. Aside from an entire political collapse, for something like that to take over. You keep saying, right? It doesn't necessarily have to take over, in my opinion, for it to be a serious, serious issue. In the
Okay, so
United
how do you
States, however,
combat this issue?
specifically in education?
Okay, so how do you combat
What's
this
that?
issue?
I think the policymakers, the politicians, need to basically call it for what it is. I think you specifically, everybody, right? All liberals or whatever labels you want to give them. I think if you just look at the stats, if you look at the polls, and I guess it's a joke to look at the polls, but if you were to look at what these people are actually saying, right? They believe if you get a 50,000 person poll, 49,999 of them are saying we think beheading babies is okay. That's obviously drastically exaggerated, but then you would say, holy shit, this is really bad. So my question to you initially was, at what point do you take those polls into consideration and say, okay, maybe we need to actively do something?
Okay, so I'm asking
in
you, what do we
policies,
actively do about it? Can you give me a single example of what you would actively do about it?
Yeah, no, I think perception in this specific instance, perception is the biggest thing. Meaning, I think it's
Ask him what happens when
we're not
Islamic
doing them any
extremism
favors,
reaches
them
60%.
being
What acts
Muslims in general,
from the past
by
make
kind of
him think
sugarcoating
something will suddenly happen?
the
How is that
the
percent
toxicity
obtained?
behind the
He
ideologies that
seems
they
to
believe
think
in.
because there
What I
have
mean
been
by that
gains
is
in recent years, it
people
will
like you,
continue.
people like
Like the
policymakers,
AI guy.
public figures, who do
Okay,
believe
hold on.
and
Before you
and
talk
me
for
personally,
like 20 minutes, so do you have an answer
sure.
for that question? What do you do? So you call it radical Islam extremism. That's what you do? That's how you combat it, is by calling it that?
That's the first step. Yeah.
Okay, what's the
It's
next
never
step?
it's
I want
never
to know
going to be a
something
light
that
switch.
I want to know something that
It's
you
never going
actually
to.
do. Like I want an example of something you actually do, not like say mean words on Infowars. Like what's something you actually do? Like say
Well, you
what's a
don't say
policy
mean
decision?
words on Infowars. That's
Okay, what's a policy
no.
decision that you do? Why have we had millions of
After
people in
the
the United
perception.
States for like years and years and years, and they haven't all grown into this? Like, at what magical point do they like take over the country? Like, I don't know. It's just I see
Well,
Christians as a
it's a
threat to.
recent phenomenon. If you've tracked it, it's a recent phenomenon. The radicalized Muslim presence in the United States. It's not exactly sure. We've been around for so long, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Muslim extremism in its current state has been around for that long, right? It's our current involvement militarily and strategically in the United States, or sorry, in the Middle East, is obviously spurring that to a large extent, and obviously disagree with. I haven't gotten into my personal views on any of this thus far. I know you keep grouping me into these people, Infowars, and these other people, but no, I think. First of all, I'm obviously not a policymaker, so I couldn't give you an exact policy to enact. It's not that easy. But first and foremost, you need to have a perception shift. You need to have a public understanding that,
Okay,
yes.
but you just said that we have a public understanding. That's why people don't behead each other. We have laws. We agree that there are some things that you shouldn't do. So I feel like we already have this public understanding.
No. What I mean by public understanding is our public understanding of that religion specifically.
What do you mean that religion? It's not that religion specifically. It's that religion radicalized specifically.
It's the religion specifically. I mean, I'm sure you can bring up a lot of balance from Christianity, but a lot of that's going to be inferred. You
What?
cannot
No, it's
draw
not. What do you mean inferred?
from the New Testament?
What do you mean? You're saying that I can't find negative actual text examples in Christianity of the Bible having fucked up shit in it?
Far less, yes. And you can't draw any direct lines. There's a lot of biblical scholars and Quran scholars or theologists rather who would argue that yes, that you can draw a direct line from what we're seeing right now in the Middle East to the text you can read about in the Quran.
You can draw a direct line to the shit that we do in the Middle East, to the direct line to the Bible. President Bush himself literally fucking said he praised to God before we went into Iraq.
I don't understand that.
What do you mean? He's Christian. What do you mean it's anecdotal? He said he's Christian. He prays to God to figure out what he wants to do.
So because one man prays to a Christian God for what
do you think that you don't think that 70% of Americans right now are Christian? You don't think that people's religions influence a fuck ton of what they do? Why do you think
that's not what you said? You said George W. Bush.
Okay, who was voted for by a ton of Christians that appreciate the fact that he's Christian. Do you think that when Trump got up and held up a Bible...
That's a lot of information.
Yeah, no, it's not, dude. What? Can you not say that?
I mean,
that's like the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
No. But what?
I know. And I'm saying for the sake of the argument that what you're saying is actually fucking retarded. When Trump holds up a Bible and says this is the most important book in the world, do you think that he's just saying that because he personally feels that way, or he's pandering to an audience of people that are largely religious and feel very strongly about their religious conviction?
Certainly pandering to an audience. Certainly.
Okay, so when Bush talks about praying to the boogeyman, God or whatever, about going to the Middle East, do you think he's just talking like very personally, or do you think he's talking about a message that resonates with a lot of his audience? Like, are you telling me?
Resonates with a decent amount, yeah.
Yeah, okay, a lot of people.
If you were to tell the United States we're going to the Middle East because of Christianity, no, I'm sorry, you're not going to get nearly as many people who are that hoorah about it.
Okay, they might not say because of Christianity, but when they say like we need to pray and figure out what is right, and we need to do like blah blah blah, our country a Christian nation, blah blah blah, like these are all very religiously heavy thoughts.
What you're actually saying right now is you cannot draw a direct line. You drew one by giving George W. Bush as an example of him saying, you took a quote from him saying that because George W. Bush said that he prays before our invasion to Iraq, therefore it was religiously motivated, but no.
Okay, so you're saying that if I go and read the Quran, I could find exact examples in the Quran of people suicide bombing themselves?
Of doing any means killing the infidels, yes you can.
Oh, wow, just killing the infidels? Because that's all over the Old Testament, dog. That's how early Christianity worked.
The Old Testament, yes. I'm not making. First of all, I never made the argument that Christianity was never a violent. In history.
It was, but it's not anymore. Why? It still exists, but it's not as violent. Like
because of developments.
Yeah, in the West,
society.
that have nothing to do with the religion. Yes. So why can't Islam be the same? You're telling me that they're fundamentally different. Why?
The Reformation with the New Testament played a large role in
what are you talking about, dude? After the Reformation, there was still tons of fucking violence and tons of imperialism led by Christian nations. The Reformation had fuck all to do. It had nothing to do with making Christianity better, period. It had absolutely nothing to do. I don't know why people... No, don't say right, because you didn't even acknowledge that. What did you expect me to roll over when you said the Reformation? The Reformation of Christianity meant nothing. We've been becoming more secular in the West over the past 50, 100 years, more and more and more and more. There's never going to be a Reformation in the Catholic Church, for instance, that says that masturbation or sex before marriage is okay. That kind of a Reformation doesn't exist. It's just been slowly dying out.
So then, are you making the argument, maybe I'm misunderstanding you, are you making the argument then that because we've seen Christianity, I don't necessarily agree or disagree with this, for the record, but because Christianity we saw in history sort of reform itself by means of society, which took a very, very long time, and we saw a lot of violence before we got to that point, then we should let Islam do the same thing, that we should let it follow the same path if we can instead use, by means of policy or...
What policy?
Or just general perception.
General perception, what?
I told you I'm not a policymaker, but...
Yeah, you haven't given me a single example. I'm just curious what you mean when you say that. I
gave you an example of general perception.
Which is calling them extremists?
Can you recite to me what I told you?
Yeah, you said that if you people on the left can just acknowledge Islam for being a bad religion, then what? It magically changes? I'm pretty sure those were pretty much your exact words.
I said most, and yes, that it. Believe it or not, it does. This is like day one sociology, man. If
this is day in sociology in day one, you would say that if everybody calls something bad, everybody is going to, and their religious convictions are going to change. You realize that people literally die for their religion. Oh, I'm sorry.
I never said anything about magic. I never said, right? I said, yes, this is day one sociology, that the perception of something really, really makes a difference. I think you just had a video on psychology, right? Your surroundings affecting your beliefs and wanting to kind of fit in. All of this plays a role. There's so many different variables in this, right? And first of all...
I agree. That's my argument, though. You can't use that. You're saying that there is only one thing that matters, and that is their religion. I'm the one saying that there are a ton of variables that determine how people act, and that religion...
You misunderstood me. What I mean is that the religion itself, if the religion were to change, there's a lot of variables that are involved. I'm not saying there's a lot of variables that
if there
are
are
involved
3
in
million peaceful...
violence.
If there are 3 million peaceful Muslims living in the United States right now, why can't we just continue to do our thing in the West, become more cultured, become more civilized, become more secular, and just carry on that path? Because it doesn't seem...
There are 3 million... I'm sorry, say that again.
There are 3 million peaceful Muslims living today in the United States. Why can't we just carry on being civilized in the West and moving in that direction? I don't see Islamic extremism growing massively in the United States or any signs of that happening. So I don't know why we can't just continue moving in a more secular direction.
First of all, I don't necessarily disagree with that. But what I'm saying is...
Wait, but you specifically said that we need to enact specific policy in order to stop these people and call Islam bad. You are saying we need to do something. If that was our goal,
yes, that is what we would need to do. That's the point I was making. I wasn't saying that we necessarily should go in that direction. But if we were to do it, then yeah, first and foremost...
Wait, so which direction should we go in?
Before any policy or anything of the like, I think we should move in a generally more secular, not policy. I keep thinking policy because you kept repeating that.
Well, because policy would actually force you to give you an actual answer and to give an actual... So like when I talk about economic policy or education policy or healthcare policy, that forces you to have an actual prepared answer and not just random bullshit conjecture that can't really be proven or disproven and just lends itself to a bunch of people getting around, getting stoned and having a conversation about nothing. I'm sorry. That seems why you keep avoiding the policy thing, because you have no real ideas or input on any of this stuff. You just kind of want to talk in vague, if we just kind of call it a bad thing, then we can kind of, move around and maybe people will be less Islamic and,
Are you saying that wouldn't be the case?
I'm saying that I don't know what you're talking. You're not really having, I'm saying right now that you're not having a real conversation. That you sound like somebody that is completely ill-prepared to have this conversation. I don't think you realize the strategic importance of Syria to Russia. I don't think you have any idea what goes on in the Middle East whatsoever. I don't think you even know what really goes on in the Western world. You've challenged me to provide you 5 things that were more of a threat to the United States than Islamic radical terrorism, and I did in an instant. And I even told you how Christians were more of a threat in each of these things because you couldn't name a single way that Islam negatively impacted any of these 5 things. And now you just keep bouncing around these really fucking fucking vague things like, well, if we just call all Islam bad, then, and you even went as far as to say that, well, you can find direct ties to the Quran for what Islam is doing now. And I asked you, well, what do you mean? Is there suicide bomb? You go, no, well, they're supposed to kill infidels. And I say, well, you did it in the Old Testament. And you're like, well, I don't know. I mean, that doesn't really count. It's like, well, I don't know what this conversation is about.
Well, so something you have a tendency of doing is what you just did right now is you brought up many different things which had many different assumptions that were, if we were to go off of that, we would assume all of those things.
So
were the
what
case.
I just did is called gish galloping. If you're talking about gish galloping, you could argue that that's what I did, but that's not. I was summarizing our conversation. I'm not trying to gish gallop you. We did talk about all of those things. Did I
maybe
summarize?
You don't see it like that, but
I don't see it like because that's the conversation that we had.
No, I'm not satisfied with the summary you gave.
Can you? Okay, I'm sorry. So can you give me a part of that you disagree?
You gave.
Okay, what was one of the conclusions that I gave that you disagree with?
You had said that the 5 different things that you asked me to name that I was
are more important than Islamic. Yeah.
That was never an argument that I made. If you were to look back at this video, I never said that.
You literally challenged me to name it. You said that I couldn't even name 5. You literally. That's why I have this notepad sitting in front of me and I named it. So I named 5. You're telling me that you didn't challenge me to do that?
Okay, hold on. Let's go over this point, right? I asked you to name 5 things that are more important than Islam. As a rebuttal, you named 5 things, or I think you named 4, but you named 5 things, let's say, and you asked me to name how Islam affects those things specifically.
No, I said how it affected. No, I had said how is it worse of a threat than any of these things? We can go through one by one, and then you said,
and I gave you an answer for that you didn't accept.
What was your answer?
That an ideology. I gave you the toxic ideology answer.
So you gave me a non-answer. Like if we were stoner bros, you'd be like, oh, dude, you gave me a non-answer.
Why is that a non-answer?
Because it's nothing. You're just giving me random, pointless bullshit conjecture. Like, oh, well, a bad ideology is a bad thing. Like, there's millions of fucking bad ideologies that exist fucking everywhere. Some of them are very pervasive in American fucking culture. Obesity is a fucking ideology, and that's killing fucking hundreds of thousands of people a year through heart disease and shit. Gun culture is a bad ideology in the United States that kills over 30,000 people a year. Our reckless driving habits are a toxic ideology that kill over 60,000 people a year. And you want to talk about Islamic extremism that's killed 2,500 people since 2000? Like...
Yes. Yeah, no, I do. I'm thinking. What I'm saying is, all of the things that you just named, I agree, are bad ideologies. Maybe even worse
but not
in terms of life.
Yeah, no, but not maybe worse, but definitely worse. These are all more threatening, and that was just off the top of my head.
That's all arguable.
Then argue. Then give me what is Islam. What on those lists that I just named is less threatening? Just give me one thing that's less threatening than Islamic extremism.
Settle down, but. I'm not going to go over any of those things. But what I'm saying is, I'll concede that point. I'm not necessarily saying that. That's the case and that's what I believe, but sure, you can make the case, for example, that reckless driving, I'm not sure what number you just threw out, but whatever number, like let's say it's 200 times or 300 times or 500 times, whatever the hell you want to say, more deadly than Islam, or sorry, than Islam extremism. For citizens living in the United States specifically, right? Now, what I would say in response to that is Islamic extremism, that ideology specifically, the lack thereof would provide benefits in all the categories you just named, including reckless driving.
And then I would ask you, how does Islamic extremism ideology impact our reckless driving culture or our gun culture or education or in the United States? In any way, just name one way.
Just simplify enough to benefit for you to be satisfied.
No, I just asked you for one example. You can't give it to me because it doesn't exist. You know it.
Explain to me. Okay, settle down. But explain to me how an example, how I would be able to give any example, right, of any ideology that would affect reckless driving that you would not consider a non-answer, and then maybe I'll be able to give you an example.
If it actually does affect, I can give you tons. The problem is I can do this from my side, right? Here's our American exceptionalist ideology that gives us this fascination with deregulating everything could contribute to bad driving culture. And how can you support that argument, Destiny? How does that ideology contribute to that? Well, the fact that our licensing process is done on a state-by-state basis, and the licensing process is very subpar compared to European countries, and the fact that you can can draw direct correlations with the lack of driver training versus the accidents that happens in states is a very good example of that. Wow, thank you, Destiny. You just provided a way in which an ideology manifests itself in a negative way that can be measured directly and has a direct negative impact. There's my example. Now, can you give me an example? So let me give you an example. Let's say that you had a city. It is a direct impact. How is it not a direct impact?
The wrong use of the word, because an example I would give in that same respect, you would call an indirect effect.
I wouldn't, though. You haven't given me anything.
I would.
Listen, okay, let's say that there was a city, okay, and you found out that Muslim women were getting in increasingly more accidents, and the reason was because their fucking hijab or whatever the fuck on their head made it so that when they turned their heads, they weren't able to see out their mirrors. This is Islamic extremism contributing to accidents in the United States. Then I would go, oh shit, you're right, this is actually really bad, right? Or let's say...
Oh, you're giving really silly examples.
I'm giving silly examples because you don't have any good ones. Can you give me a good example?
In order to satisfy you, I would have to give you an example that would directly reduce the amount that you would be able to see a direct reduction in the amount of, say, vehicle accidents in a paradigm shift through Islamic extremism as a whole. And obviously that's impossible to ask. That's not a question. This is a question about philosophy. This isn't a question about direct, tangible impact. That's never what I claim to have.
Oh, okay. When I'm talking about what is a threat to the United States, I'm talking about direct, tangible impact, because these are the conversations that are important to America today, not random meanderings about the possible philosophical implications. Okay, if you... I don't know. How do you disagree? So you think it's more important to talk about the philosophy of Islam than talking about our underemployment numbers or talking about our low median wages or the fact that even though GDP rises, GDP per capita is not staying on track? Or how is it more important?
Well, first of all, economists are going to talk about the employment rates. The different sectors are going to talk about their own specific fields. That's I'm not sure what you're getting at there, but yeah, I think this has just as much not requirement, but should have just as much incentive to be discussed and to try and make changes. The point that I was refuting that you made initially was that Islamic extremism does not affect the United States, and it should not be something that we actually care about. And it's actually a result of brainwash from the Republicans to make you afraid and make you believe that Islamic extremism is a threat, when in actuality, the director of the CIA, the director of the FBI, all of the intelligence communities as a whole have come out and said, yes, this is a very, very big threat that we're having. A lot of the things you don't hear about.
Wait, they said what is a very big threat we're having?
Islamic terrorism.
I'm sorry, can you give me one quote or one phrase or one anything where the CIA or the FBI have come out and said that Islamic extremism is a big threat to the United States?
Sure. Give me a sec. I'll link you something.
But you can't. I follow this and I haven't heard this statement. I feel like if I would have heard this statement, I would have, or if this statement was issued, I would have heard about it.
Okay.
Because right now our intelligence community seem to be more concerned with Russia than Islamic extremism. Actually, I think Christian right-wing groups in the United States, actually, didn't they say the sovereign citizen people were the biggest threat right now in terms of terrorist attacks in the United States?
Say that again?
I think that weren't like the sovereign citizen people like the most heavily investigated domestic terrorists in the United States right now, I thought?
That would be pretty hilarious. I don't know. I haven't actually heard that specifically. Hold on. Let me read this article really fast. Try and get the quote specifically.
Pentagon orders... Oh, this is the Washington Times. The Pentagon is ordering the top brass to incorporate climate change into virtually everything they do. This doesn't sound like Islamic extremism. But maybe you could argue that Islam... Actually, there's a good example. So I think one of the ways Islamic people... ISIS kills people by burning them to death. And you could argue that they utilize fossil fuels when they set people on fire in the cages and that could contribute to polluting the environment. There's an argument for how radical Islamic extremism might manifest itself into a negative impact on our environment.
Um,
I'm trying to find arguments for you, dude. I'm sorry. I'm trying as hard as I can.
You're not doing a very good job.
Yeah. Here's CNSnews.com. This is from 2016. CIA director. Terrorist groups are driven by this ideology that is not rooted in Islam. CIA director John Brennan said Wednesday, words or comments that taint a religion as being the source of the problem are detrimental to our interests in dealing with the Muslim world. So this is the CIA director saying that people like you are detrimental to our interests in dealing with the Muslim world. That's my argument.
Okay.
Brennan argued that incendiary remarks about Islam do not help to arrest this cancer that has taken over so many of the communities because a lot of the underlying conditions that exist within the Middle East and Africa, South Asia areas, because of economic deprivation, political disenfranchisement, and lack of opportunity. Wow, great. Do you think this guy watches my stream? Maybe he just gets all of his ideas from me. I don't know. He said
You're talking about the CIA director?
Yeah, he said that fanatics, extremists, and terrorists are driven by this ideology that is not rooted in Islam.
Okay, is that? I'm not sure. Is that what you're saying your argument is?
All right, listen. I'll give you the last word. All right, what do you want to tell everybody before we're done?
I don't know. I think you weren't really interested in having a conversation about the actual impact of it. You wanted something to satisfy your desires that was impossible to give.
It's not, though, because I gave you a million examples. Okay, can you try to have a conversation with me where you act like me and I'll act like you? And I'll try to, and I'll see if I can give an example of anything. The problem is that you just don't.
Say that again.
Let's have a
conversation
reverse
where I act like you.
Yeah, let's have a reverse debate where you'll take the side and I'm attacking Christians in the United States, okay? And we'll have a reverse debate where you ask the questions and I'll try to give answers that would satisfy me, okay? My problem with you isn't that I came into this conversation expecting unrealistic things. The problem is just that you know very little to nothing about what you're talking about. So now let's switch the roles, okay? You ask me the questions about Christians in the United States, okay? So my contention is that Christianity is very damaging to the United States, okay? Now go.
I would agree with that contention, though. Are you asking me to? I mean, I don't really have.
Okay, I can give you specific.
On the contrary,
I can give you specific examples in the United States of specific policies, specific policy makers, and specific voter bases that are leading to the detriment of the United States. That are detrimental to the United States.
I'm sure you can, man.
But you can't give me any of that for Islam.
It wasn't. It was never going to be a discussion about tangible impact. That was never the intention.
So then the intention was to talk about a potentially bad ideology that might grow in the future and maybe might lead to some possibly negative things somewhere in the future. That was the point of this debate.
As well as the really ignorant statement you made in the video, claiming that things happening outside of the U.S. do not impact the U.S. That those ideologies and the terrorism that's happening outside of U.S. soil. For some reason, has no impact on our day-to-day lives.
I don't think at the moment, I don't think it does. I don't think so. And you haven't provided me a single reason to believe otherwise, other than maybe in the future, a growing number of people might be swayed to a radical ideology that might manifest itself in a negative way in the future.
Do you personally believe we should be doing anything right now in the Middle East, meddling at all?
That's a really complicated question, dog. I don't know the answer to that. It's real. I don't like our policy now, but it's really complicated.
I mean...
But what we do in the Middle East right now has nothing to do with Islamic terrorism. Has absolutely nothing to do with Islamic terrorism.
It does.
It doesn't, though. To somebody that's uninformed, it might. If you get all of your news from Breitbart or something, maybe. But it has to do with geopolitical interests.
I've opened Breitbart maybe once to see what the fuss is. That's not.
Okay.
I would claim that I'm actually a lot more liberal than you are. I'm just.
What are the issues in the Middle East that have to deal with Islamic terrorism? I guess
genocide en masse?
Like what?
Let's go to BBC Arab or BBC.com, and let's see what happened today in the Middle East, right? About Islamic extremism.
Okay, I really hate to do this to you.
I'll give you a few.
No, here. Okay, I just want to ask a question. I'm not trying to be mean, okay? But you're the one that tweeted the really inflammatory things. Can you tell me where ISIS came from?
Can I tell you where ISIS came from?
Yeah.
Like who had originated them?
Sure. Yeah, just like the general foundings. We don't even need exact names.
I would say the U.S. has a big role in that. That if
How?
you look at the history with Osama bin Laden through the radicalization from the Egyptian man that I can't remember his
It's
name right
okay to
now.
say you don't know.
What's that?
Can you tell me anything about the founding of ISIS, about how it started?
Yeah, I was telling you right now.
You're not right now. No, this has nothing to do with any of it.
Are you saying that Al Qaeda and
Al Qaeda a little bit. You're getting closer, warmer.
uh, okay, I no I if you were to allow me to finish my point, then yeah,
Okay,
I
go
would tell
ahead.
you that.
You started talking about Osama bin Laden. I don't know why, but okay, go ahead.
Well, he was the leader of Al Qaeda.
Okay.
Did you know that?
Yep. But did you know that Osama bin Laden wasn't the one that? Or no, I'm sorry. I don't want to fill in any blanks for you. Go ahead.
Okay.
Do you think Osama bin Laden was in charge of Al Qaeda when ISIS broke off from them? I just gave you a little bit of the answer in the question, but you know that he wasn't, right? So,
I'm sorry. Say that again.
do you think that Osama bin Laden was the one in charge of Al Qaeda when
No, he wasn't.
when ISIS broke off from him? Okay. So I don't know why you brought up Osama bin Laden.
No. Are you asking me for the?
I'm just
like,
asking you how
the
ISIS
textbook?
started. Like how did ISIS start? Like, just give me a kind of like an example of what's going on.
There was a Jordan man from I don't remember any of the names specifically, but there was a Jordanian man who I believe he had been radicalized in somewhere between 2005 and 2008, and there was already a terrorist group through after the Fallujah fall that was in the wake of Al Qaeda essentially, and from them they sort of merged into what we would consider to be ISIL, I believe was the official name for it, or the sorry, not the Lebanon one, the Iraq one, which was I don't think I think it was just a 3-letter Islamic State in Iraq.
Wait, what did you think the ISIL was from? That was the Lebanon one you said?
What's that?
You said that the ISIL was the one that formed in Lebanon?
Or no, Libya. I'm sorry, I misspoke there.
What was ISIS?
Did I say
ISIL? Oh,
Lebanon?
because ISIL was the Islamic State of Iraq and Libya, right?
Yes. Well, no. I before it was ever ISIL, it was just the Islamic State in Iraq.
Okay.
Right.
No.
Have I been wrong?
Yeah.
No. Give me an example. Of
I mean,
what
ISIL stands for the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. It had nothing to do with Libya, but
Oh,
all right, keep going.
so when it first formed, it wasn't just the Islamic State of Iraq.
No, keep going.
Well, I wish I would have anything in front of
No,
me.
no, you just don't know anything about what you're talking about. You
No, I
tweeted
do.
at
I'm
me.
giving you a
No,
very
you
general-
don't, dude. You don't know anything about what you're talking. You're like totally fucking. You're like fucking furiously googling shit. You're like, oh shit, like I don't fucking know anything about this shit. Like,
Okay.
what was? Do you know the name of the
so-
Al Qaeda guy that was leading the Al Qaeda when ISIS broke off from them?
No, I don't know.
Do you know the
any
name of the
names.
guy that leads ISIS now that we're looking for in Mosul? That's being chased to the west.
Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi.
Okay, yeah, okay, you got that one at least. All right. Do you know where what ISIS majorly recruited from? Which group of people they recruited from when they were in Iraq?
From when they were in Iraq.
Yeah.
Some form of Sunni Islamic terrorism. I don't know the name of the group.
Okay.
Is this where you give me the answers and
No,
where
I
was
don't.
going?
I don't need to give you the answers. You can go.
I,
do it
I,
yourself,
I
dude.
have yet to see what I've been wrong in thus far. What the
I don't
summary
know,
I've been
man.
getting.
I'm not sure. It's a crazy world. Okay. I mean, I think we're good. I don't think you're equipped to have this conversation. I'm not sure why. I don't know if you thought that you would come on here and I would just be like, I would be totally ignorant of everything, and you thought that you could really get away with trying to have a conversation that you were totally ill-equipped to have, or why would you even ask me to go into this area if you didn't even know like where ISIS came from? Why would you have the confidence to ask me that? Especially when I got raped by that Ryan Dawson dude. You don't think I've done like a little bit of reading on this so that I wouldn't stumble into this accident again? Like,
if you equated initially in your video with ISIS, or sorry, not ISIS, but Islam and Christianity, you equated the two, and you actually made the assumption that Christianity had a much larger role, a much bigger impact.
what does this have to do with anything that we were just talking about?
that it has nothing to do with the founding. I don't give a shit about the founding.
Oh no, I was just curious. Well, but I know you don't give a shit about the founding, but that's a really important part of where ISIS comes from. You see, because
I have a general understanding.
You have no understanding.
You have yet to show. You have yet to tell me what I've.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let me give you a more general question. Okay, why do you think ISIS was able to form and recruit?
Well, like any terrorist cell, there was turmoil in the area, and people were really pissed at the mainly the United States oppression, and
you don't know what you're talking about. The Sunnis weren't pissed at the United States at all. The Sunnis wanted the United States to be more involved instead of leaving the current leader in charge. The reason why ISIS was able to recruit in the north was because of Sunni oppression by the government. That's the answer. That's the easy, simple answer. Like, if you have any idea what you're talking about.
Can I ask you a question?
What?
What does any of this have to do with the ideology behind Islam?
Because people like you get fed certain narratives and you believe them without understanding anything that you're saying. So, like, right now, maybe you'll change your mind a little bit after this conversation. Listen, right now, you know in your mind, you know it's true. ISIS formed because Islam is a toxic ideology, and ISIS was founded on Islam being a bad ideology. That's why earlier you argued you can draw direct lines to everything that ISIS is doing, to the fact that they are Islamic, that they are following in the footsteps of Muhammad. But the fact is, you don't know anything about ISIS. You have no idea who they are, where they formed from. You said it was the Islamic State of Iraq and Libya, dog. I don't think you can find Libya on a map, okay? You have no idea. Do you know what continent Libya is in?
Egypt.
All right, listen, I love you, dude. It's been fun. I'll see you later, okay? I can't. I'm sorry, I can't. I actually can't. I can't deal with it. Is this what an average Trumpel sounds like? I can't do it. I wouldn't be able to have... I take back everything I said. I don't want to talk to any more Trumpels. I think we have to move on, okay? I think we have to be done with politics. If this is discourse in the United States today, then I just have to fucking kill myself. Like, I just have to kill myself. It has to be all over, dude. I don't know. I'm not even sure. Yeah, that's it. I can't do it. I can't do it anymore, all right? I can't do it. Okay, I'm sorry. I sounded like a huge dick, okay? I know I did. I sounded really mean this discussion. My problem was, this was the guy's tweets at me, okay? I just watched your discussion on Islam versus Christianity in the US. You have a laughable understanding of geopolitics. It's like this is your first day being involved with politics, LeMayo. It's unfortunate that you only choose to debate the lowest common denominators. I'll handle this, Xenon 1. Please, Destiny, allow me to educate you. I wish you had the bollocks to debate someone with any critical thinking skills, right? I'm sorry, but this is the reason. Like, these are how these people, and I know, I'm making fun of this guy in particular, but I guarantee you that if I pulled on any random Trumpel onto my stream, it would be the exact same thing. They'd have no fucking idea whatsoever what they're talking about. Like... These are all trolls? Is every single person that I argue with on Twitter a troll? You can't just keep saying they're all trolls. They're not, dude. Trump is the president of the United States. Trump is the president. Is every single person, are all of these people in the Donald, are these guys all trolling? Did everybody that go to the poll booths troll? Did everybody that vote for Trump, are they all trolls?
Egypt is my favorite continent.
Is JonTron trolling? Oh, fuck me, dude. It's too much. Allow me to educate you. Allow me to educate you, Stephen.